The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 180, a bill to require the identification of companies that conduct business operations in Sudan, to prohibit United States government contracts with such companies and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Frank, and the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Garrett, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume. This is a very good day for the cause of human rights and for drawing on the strength of the American people to vindicate the values that are so widely shared among our people. This bill is part of a package of two. Subsequently, we will deal with a bill involving the country of Iran. Both of them have a similar purpose, namely to empower Americans in their individual capacities, through their state governments, through organizations, to express in a concrete way the overwhelming opposition in our countries to the genocide being perpetrated by the government of Sudan and Darfur, and to the effort by the sometimes pro-genocide government of Iran to acquire a nuclear capacity. Now, what we have, a nuclear weapons capacity, I should specify. We have sanctions against those countries. And let me say a word about sanctions. People are sometimes supportive of sanctions when they agree with the cause, and then denigrate the notion of sanctions when they disagree with the cause. History is clear. When sanctions, economic sanctions, are widely supported globally, they have an impact. I had a great day years ago, Mr. Speaker, standing in the Statuary Hall just from this chamber, and here Nelson Mandela thanked the Congress of the United States because we'd enacted sanctions. And he said that the enactment of sanctions by the U.S. as part of a worldwide enactment of sanctions brought an end to apartheid earlier than it should have. Our former colleague, Mr. Dellums, now the mayor of Oakland, had a very proud day then. He'd been the leader of it. And it's very fitting that the initiator of the bill we are dealing with today is his successor, the gentleman from California, Ms. Lee, who has been the driving force in the bill we have before us. And what we have is this. There are American citizens, state governments, and others who have funds invested in collective investment entities. And they have invested the funds to get a maximum return. Pension funds, state governments, and others, individuals in mutual funds. And they have, in many cases, gone to the investment entity and said, we don't want our money helping the dictatorship of Iran go nuclear. We don't want our money used to perpetuate Darfur and genocide and help a government that does that. We want you to sell our investments in companies that are complicit in this through economic support. And they've been met in some cases by the argument that, well, we can't do that because we have a fiduciary responsibility as the investment entity to maximize returns, and therefore we can't sell this company and that company. And after which they are complicit in Darfur, complicit in Iran's nuclear weapons, that's irrelevant. Mr. Speaker, I think that is often more of an excuse than a reason. But today we render that moot, that debate, because the two bills we are dealing with, now with Darfur and subsequently with Iran, do not compel any investment entity to do anything. These are not bills of compulsion. They fully respect the market. What they say is if you are a mutual fund, if you are a pension fund manager, and significant numbers of the investors in your entity or the beneficiaries of your entity come to you and say, clean my hands, I do not want to be financing these outrageous regimes and their terrible practices, you cannot plead, oh, I'm sorry, the law won't let me do it. Because these bills have a common theme. They prevent lawsuits against these investment entities who take these issues into account. And they have a powerful double effect. First, they'll add to the effectiveness of sanctions, because there is in the United States widespread anger at both regimes. And not only will they add to the effectiveness of sanctions, they do it in a way that is fully respectful of the autonomy of these entities. As I said, there is no compulsion, no interference with the market. It is freeing Americans to do this, and that's also important because you have the regime in Iran, you have the regime in Sudan trying to avoid the public obloquy that they so richly deserve by saying, oh, well, that's just the American administration. They try to separate the president and his policies in opposition to both of these from the American people. What these bills do is to make it clear, as I think they soon will once they are law, that the opposition to the genocide in Sudan, to the nuclearization, the weapons nuclearization in Iran, is widespread throughout this country. That this opposition is not just the president, it's just the Congress. It is a broad, deeply held American view. One final point before I reserve the balance of my time. A letter from the National Council on Foreign Trade complained that with these bills we were going to let the states get into the foreign policy business. No, this is the Congress of the United States into the foreign policy business. This does not say that any mutual fund anywhere, anytime can divest for a foreign policy reason. I think, by the way, they already have that right. And we make it clear in this bill. We're not trying to say that they don't. But what this package of bills does is these two bills make two foreign policy judgments. The United States Congress, by passing these bills, will say we have an absolute horror about the genocide in Darfur and want to do everything we can to prevent it, and not prevent it, sadly, but put an end to it. And we are overwhelmingly opposed to that regime in Iran acquiring nuclear weapons. These are two very specific foreign policy judgments that Congress will make. We will then be empowering people in the United States to join us in implementing them. But the argument that this somehow throws open the foreign policy process willy-nilly is simply wrong. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.